Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Football Diary podcast this week, where there's been shocks galore in the Premier League, which is great to see for the neutral, but not so much if you're a Manchester City fan, as they lose 2-1 to Brighton in a really enthralling encounter for the Seagulls, who came back brilliant in the second half, and also Spurs losing at home to Ipswich, who got their first win in the Premier League for over 22 years. That will start our coverage, I think, this weekend, Dave, but it's been an interesting one, hasn't it, for shocks, with City obviously, first of all, being the biggest one, their fourth game in a row in all competitions that they've lost, to a resilient Brighton side who came back brilliantly in the second half to shock us all. But it was a deserved victory for Brighton, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's becoming a bit of a fortress for them, the Amex, I think, in terms of, look at some of the teams that beat this season, Man United, Tottenham, obviously, and now Man City. So he's building up a little bit of a reputation there, Hutzler, I think. But I think it's not so much of a surprise now. I think that this team is really coming on kind of leaps and bounds, and they've shown that they can respond when they go behind in games as well.
Yeah.
We saw, obviously, with the Spurs game especially. And I think a lot of the talent they've got now in there, alongside some of the experience that they have in this game, they made the changes, I think, in the second half that really kind of turned the tide, I think, of the game, and really compounded that misery on a Man City side that looked really out of sorts in that second half. But you've got to give a lot of credit to Brighton, I think, for the changes they made. I think Belieber, when he came on, was outstanding. Matt O'Reilly, it was just great to see him back after such an unfortunate sort of start to his Brighton career, having that awful injury and being out for the last 2 or 3 months. You know, what an introduction for him.
Yeah, what a Premier League debut. Well, there was that, and there was João Pedro's return as well, who came off the bench with a goal and an assist. Yeah, inspired substitutions from Fabian Hürzeler, and it's another big scalp for him, isn't it? At the age of 31, who, we keep going on about his age, but it does feel like he's got more experience of coaching than he actually has, because those kind of in-game decisions have kind of won him games so far. Brighton up to, I think, 6th now, I believe. So, yeah, an amazing start to the season. And at this rate, you can't really see it not continuing. The players they've got who turn it on, especially in the second half, like Matoma's just such a handful, isn't he, as well? And when you've got players like João Pedro coming off the bench, it looks like a really positive forward line for Brighton, and no more than they deserve to get this win. And you could talk about City being out of sorts, but they dominated that first half, City. They had so many chances to put the game to bed. So there's a bit of luck, I think, on Brighton's part. But City were just wasteful as well. So going into the half-time break at 1-0 down, it kind of, I think, gave Brighton a bit of a hope that they could get back into it. I think at the minute, if there's ever a time to get back into a game against Man City, it's probably right now, isn't it? And credit to Brighton for doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to say that, City are in a downturn in form, but I think with that set of players that they've got, it's always going to be a difficult task. But it's about, I think, a lot of the teams nowadays in the Premier League, you look at the amount of the times that teams are taking points off of each other. I mean, I think there's 4 points between 13th and 3rd, which is crazy.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I've said that they were in 5th, but they're actually in 6th, but it's on goal difference. Like Chelsea are in 3rd on the same amount of points as Brighton. That's mad.
I mean, it just shows how exciting a season it's shaping up to be, really, if teams can keep being this competitive with each other and taking points off of each other. I mean, it's probably unprecedented. It could be, for all we know.
Yeah.
But I think the options that they've got on and off the bench, I think you mentioned there João Pedro. We mentioned Evan Ferguson, a couple of weeks ago, and him coming back and getting his first goal in a while. It's great for them, and I just think it's really easy on the eye to have so many young players coming through and seeing them kind of their talents being nurtured the way it has been, and they've got that kind of model down to a T, haven't they, the club at the moment? Yeah,
there's a lot of clubs, I think, in that position from sort of 3rd down to 13th almost, like you said, who have got better this season. They've levelled up, and teams who were above them traditionally, like Tottenham, like United, they are suddenly finding themselves almost their equal, which is really competitive for the Premier League. And although Liverpool, which we'll talk about in a moment, have streaked quite far ahead at the top, this level of competition is kind of rare, isn't it, this deep into the season? What is it, 11 games now? So yeah, for a neutral fan, it's great, but for Manchester City fans, it must be a little bit concerning, you'd think, because obviously 4 games in all competitions in a row lost. The first time they've done that since 2006. Pep Guardiola was his usual sort of spiky defensive self when asked about it as well. He's obviously pointed to like the injuries that the club has got. Obviously without Rodri as well, the Ballon d'Or winner, is going to have an impact on any team, isn't it? But has he got a point? Do you think City should feel sort of hard done by? I think for me, their time has come for injuries. Like every other big club has suffered this in the last couple of years, especially with the amount of games that have been played. I think this is kind of City's time to suffer, don't you?
Yeah, I think a lot of their key players now that were of the past, for instance, Kyle Walker, Kevin De Bruyne as well, they're not getting any younger now. They obviously enter the years, and it just feels as though I think there's a turning point coming for the club personally. And you can't rely on one player. A lot of people are going to be, making an excuse of Rodri not being available. But there's so many good players in that squad that are more than capable of filling in and doing a job. Let's not. If you're making that excuse up for Man City, what can you say for the rest of the league? That's the thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's blown a sizable hole in their squad, but it's a sizable squad for a reason, and it's meant to withstand kind of crises like this. And like I say, Villa fans will say the same about last season. United fans have had their fair share of injury. Tottenham fans, every top club has had a bit of a crisis. Newcastle, how many injuries did they have at one point? So yeah, I think City have kind of rode their luck from the injury front for a while and done really well and kind of reaped the benefits from it. So to see them hitting their own kind of patch of injuries is a little bit of karma balancing out, I think, for me, for the Premier League. And it's all the better, I think, for the entertainment value, that's for sure. But I won't dwell on their misfortune any longer. Well done to Brighton for a great result. Another team with a great result this weekend is Ipswich, Dave. Their first win in the Premier League for 22 odd years. First win of the season, obviously. And they went ahead against Tottenham, which, Tottenham always seem to let teams go ahead at the minute, don't they? They're struggling to get ahead in games, but Ipswich really were value for their lead for a while. And they went, I think it was 2-0 up against Spurs at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as well, which is an incredible set of circumstances for a team that many were tipping for relegation. But that forward line for Ipswich was quite hard to handle for Tottenham, wasn't it?
Yeah, mischievous. I think that front three, they obviously blamed Delap, and particularly, I think, Sam Smolix, who just to create another case of, it's almost like Jamie Vardy Mark II. I think you mentioned his breakout season at Blackburn at that kind of level. I think he'd been in the Championship for three seasons before he's made this step up to the Premier League. But he'd never really had a season like he did last year, 27 goals in 40-odd appearances, I think it was.
Yeah, brilliant record.
But he's really announced himself. And at 28 years of age as well, just doing that, I don't think he really got any closer. I think if you only have to look back to 2018-2019 season, he was playing at League 2 level at Colchester United. Yeah. It's not all that long ago.
It's been a big year for him.
So it's such an achievement, and I think it also shows what you can still achieve at an unthinkable sort of, unimaginable sort of dream that players have. And the likes of Jamie Vardy's done, recently with Leicester as well, who obviously only joined Leicester at 25 years of age from Fleetwood. So he's done it an even bigger extreme more than anything. But he's such a clever player as well. I watched him quite a bit at Blackburn last year, and I think his movement and his imagination in the game and his work rate off of the ball as well as on it just adds quite a good balance to that Ipswich front line. And this finish was so inventive as well. It's probably not the best over kit you'll
not
see.
Not the cleanest, yeah.
You've got to put it in the back of the net, and he's shown that he's got a real eye for goal, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Over this last couple of years, and hopefully, some way to contribute in as much as he can and keep Ipswich up in the league, because I think everybody, probably a lot of Ipswich fans, would have been a little bit worried at being 2-0 up, because you've looked over the last few weeks when they've gone ahead.
True.
And obviously they've not been able to kind of keep a hold of those leads and gone on to lose games from winning positions as well. I think it will be such a relief for them, because they've, I think this is a turning point for them. I think this will give them belief that they can go on, score goals. I think not just going up 1-0 in games, 2-0 in games against the biggest teams in the league, and be able to hold that position and go on and get a win, because I think they've done tremendously well so far.
Yeah, I mean, they've showed defensive naivety, I think, at times, but you can't fault them going forward. And I think they've drawn like 5 games. It's quite a lot of draws they've had, which shows kind of they're on the right track almost. Like they're getting close to winning games. So this win was a long time coming. But to be against Tottenham makes it all the more impressive. And I like you say, that dynamism from Smodics, he's such an all-action, non-stop threat, really. But that combined with Liam Delap, who I thought just bullied the Tottenham defence. Dragusin had an awful game. Did you see the midweek game against Galatasaray as well? He conceded an error to Victor Osimhen, didn't he, to let him in for his first goal. And without Van der Ven, it seems like he's not really a big replacement, is he? He's not the same like-for-like kind of player. So I think Spurs really struggled with Delap, and Dragusin especially couldn't really handle him. But he's such a physical presence too, Delap, isn't he? We said in a few podcasts back, how much of an inspired signing he is. You get Smodics, the championship top scorer from last season, and you get Delap, who's, a youth player from one of the top teams in the top academies in the country. And you've got a recipe there for some success, you'd think. And I think so far it's looking positive. If they can score goals, Ipswich have got a fighting chance, really, haven't they?
I think there's always an element of risk. I think, obviously, when you buy in players from those kind of backgrounds, that there's a bit of there's an untried nature there, isn't there? If they're not tried and tested at this level. But I think there will be, particularly from that recruitment team at Ipswich, would have seen facets in Smodics' game last year at Blackburn, and this is a player with a lot of experience over his years and maturing. He's at a good age really to go in there and make an impact, and he seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders really to adapt to this new league and just kind of thrive in the role that he is. And like you mentioned, Delap as well, he's just like an old school kind of striker, isn't he really?
Yeah, he is.
I just think he's got such a physique, and he's a quick player for his size. He puts himself about, he gets in those areas which we don't see a lot of strikers getting in and poaching goals and sensing sort of those opportunities. He's great at it. So
it's a very poached goal as well. He kind of nicked it on the line, didn't he? Like, it shouldn't really been his goal, but he was in and around the 6-yard box waiting for a chance for so long that he kind of deserved it in a way.
Those are the sort of goals you want to be scoring, though, as well. I think as a striker, I think a lot of strikers were looking to score these beautiful goals, but you've got to sense those opportunities and get in the right areas. And I think there's been a lack of strikers like that actually in the Premier League of recent times.
True.
They've been able to get in those positions. I think, we've had Javier Hernandez at Man United, that kind of penalty box poacher senses those opportunities coming his way. I think there's been a lack of that, and it's good to see him putting them away.
Ipswich, though, out of the relegation zone, which is good to see for them. Obviously not such good news for Crystal Palace, who take their place in the relegation zone. But for Ipswich, I think this is momentum building, like you say. Whether it's a turning point or not, I don't know. I've still got loads of doubts about how good they are defensively. I think they need to do something in January, some kind of experience brought in. And we said this before, didn't we? What is it about Ipswich do you think that works, and what do you think they need to work on from here on if this is going to be a turning point?
I think the game management is a massive part of it. I think if you look at, obviously, when they went ahead 2-0, I think they managed the game a lot better this time around than they have in previous weeks. I think finding the right moments to slow the game down, and probably that naivety, I think, at times probably hampers them a little bit. I think almost trying to force situations going forward, probably trying to break too quickly at times and just slow things down and just be a bit more streetwise. But that comes with experience as well. But I think McKenna will know this. This is a guy who's been at United for numerous years and worked under some of the best coaches around. I think his reaction after this game, it showed you a lot of what it meant to him. I think it's massive for them. I think it will give them that, like I say, that belief to really go on and just continue as they are and just have no fear. I think there is a fearlessness about them, isn't there? I feel
there is.
You saw it at times. I liken it a little bit to Luton last year. Luton went ahead in games numerous times last year and didn't have a struggle with scoring goals, but they just lacked a little bit of know-how, I think, at key times in certain games. And hopefully, as the season goes on, they can gradually sort of improve on that.
Yeah, Ipswich becoming a team that are quite likeable, despite the fact Ed Sheeran's sitting in the stands. I won't hold that against them. But they do play some nice football, I think, going forward. But you have to ask questions to think of the opposition. At Tottenham, in this instance, do you know what? They've had a couple of false dawns this season where you think, yes, that result is Spurs. That's what they do best. And they've played brilliantly when it's come off for them. But they're also so inconsistent. And you could see Ange Postecoglou after the game so defeated, like his body language. When he gets defeated, his kind of demeanour drops to such a sad, like feeling sorry for himself sulk. And they asked him, "What went wrong, Ange? Why did you lose this game?" And he went, "Yeah, it's on me. It's all on me." And I was like, come on, man, you've got to be more analytical than that. But he took it really personally. But Spurs, their inconsistency is costing them the season. And I think they've lost like 5 games already in the season or something like that, which is mad. I'll have to check that. But yeah, Spurs' inconsistency is really costing them. Why is that, Dave? Yeah, it is 5 defeats so far this season. 5 wins, 5 defeats. It's literally all or nothing with them in the middle.
Yeah, we spoke about it. I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, didn't we? That you kind of are on a high at a point, and then all of a sudden, just round the corner, there's just a really unexpected sort of performance. Obviously, beat United the other week, didn't they?
Well, the league's top scorers. They've got 23 goals so far in 10 games. It's mad.
And the next week, they're ahead at Brighton, cruising, completely capitulating in the second half. And it's just unforeseen. I don't know why I was surprised, to be honest, because it's happened a lot. And it happened a lot last season as well. But at this point, it's finding like what the issue is, what is causing it to happen time and again. Is it a mentality issue? The players almost thinking the game's done or thinking the result is a foregone conclusion? Like, I'd hope not, because this is a young team. This is actually a really young team, and I think they need a little bit of guidance in there. I'm going to be honest.
Well, they were unlucky in some ways because Brennan Johnson had a great chance in the first half to put Spurs ahead, and it was uncharacteristic of him to have missed it. If he'd have scored that, then it would have been a different story, I think. I think Ipswich would have lost any wind in their sails.
I think it's when the going gets tough, though.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, Dave, if they'd have won this game, they'd have been third on goal difference. They're part of that pack of teams that are only a few points apart. So as tight as the Premier League is, there's a missed opportunity for them as well. They could have really been up amongst it had this result gone their way. So it's a shame, isn't it, that they're not turning teams over like Ipswich, but Ipswich aren't a team to be turned over right now. They had to have dug in deep to win, and they just didn't do that.
I think when you're at home, though, as well, I think you're expected to kind of push home the initiative, and really it's a game that they should be making comfortable for themselves, I think, with probably the aspirations that they have. That's no disrespect to Ipswich, but I think in this situation that Tottenham are in, I think some of the investment that they've made in some of their squad and the players, it was looking like Solanke was going to go on, obviously, after his goals in previous weeks. But I just think they're really struggling. I think they lack a little bit of experience in there, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe.
So who knows anymore with this Tottenham side? It's as difficult to explain as watching Man United sometimes. You just don't know what is happening and what actually goes on in training, I think, because it just seems like some of the performances that you can't fathom them, can you? It's just...
No. When they're good, they're great, but when they're bad, they are shambolic, and that's a real issue for Postecoglou to deal with, isn't it? But yeah, that's one to watch Spurs, because they could either be great or terrible. That's stressful for fans to see, isn't it? Is Arsenal's title race over already after 11 games? They drew 1-0 with Chelsea. Is that the case, Dave? 9 points adrift now of Manchester City. They're not top, are they? Liverpool at the top. We always thought it'd be City versus Arsenal, but Liverpool have surprised everybody with their form. But Arsenal have been equally surprising by not keeping pace, haven't they? I mean, Odegaard came back in this game. I think it made a big difference to their play going forward. But this was almost a measure of how good Chelsea have become so far this season, but also how underconfident Arsenal are as well, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's a difficult game, I think, to pick apart, really. I think there was quite a mixture of what we've spoken about in previous weeks of each team, and Arsenal's, I think, lack of creativity without Odegaard in there, obviously coming back and getting an assist in his return, Brilliant for him. But I think Chelsea have been a bit of a mixed bag so far this season. They've looked great at times. And I definitely think their confidence as a team has really improved, I think, since Maresca's been in. I think the way they've managed games has been a lot better. You look at what went on at times last season, it was just crazy to watch. But I think the likes of Caicedo, I think he's come on leaps and bounds actually this season. And he's looking like a player that's got a lot more experience than he has. He's still young, let's not forget, but I think he's really helped this team is definitely, I think, in terms of when they've been in difficult moments, they've not panicked. I don't think this Chelsea team, I think they've been still been really competitive and be able to respond. You look at the United game a couple of weeks ago, but I think you still want more. You still find yourself wanting more from this Chelsea team because you look at the talent they've got in there. I think we're just waiting for it to come together a little bit more, and I think it's going to require a little bit of time. But it's crazy some of the talents that they have at their disposal.
Yeah, it's a good young team, and I started this section by asking you whether Arsenal are out of the title race. You didn't actually answer that, so I'll come back to that in a moment. I guess the question that's raised is, are Chelsea part of the title conversation now because they've found themselves in third place? They're in touching distance of the top two, which hasn't been the case for Chelsea for a while. And I think one thing Maresca's got right this season is his squad management, especially. He's kept the squad smaller, which it needed to be. He's got obviously a whole different set of players to use for the Conference League, and they're still shining against a team like FC Noah, winning 8-0 in the league, which is mental. But they're talented players getting a run out, and I think that's important to have when you've got a lot of talented young players at your disposal. So people are getting minutes. He solved the riddle of Enzo Fernandez by just not playing him, with Caicedo and Lavio, like you say, both performing really well in the middle. Having said that, Fernandez came on and supplied the assist for Chelsea's goal. And Pedro Neto came in as well, played really well. So players that are coming in are taking their chances. So it feels like a more harmonious squad, I think, and that's definitely down to Maresca. Does that make them on the cusp of a title challenge, though, do you think?
I think they're way off that still. You look at some of the bigger games they've played this season. they couldn't beat United. And United were also in a very difficult position. I think everyone expected a harder game there for Man United. Probably Chelsea to get a result. And obviously in this game against Arsenal, I think Arsenal have struggled for form of late as well. And I think Chelsea obviously being in the position that they're in, I think obviously really coming on. I think these are the games you've got to take 3 points from, not just be scraping a draw to kind of push that initiative. And I think
maybe.
just to show yourselves as challengers. I think they're a little bit off that now, but who knows? Stranger things have happened, hasn't there? And like we mentioned, it's so tight, isn't it, in and around those sort of challenging spots. I think Liverpool have got a massive breathing space, really, to be honest, between obviously first, second. So it's about those now that are chasing to kind of chase the pack. I think Arsenal on the other hand.
I worry about Arsenal. I really do, because we had them as our favourites for the league, but it was based on them growing and learning lessons from previous seasons. And I feel like Mikel Arteta as a coach is almost like regressing a little bit. I feel like he doesn't know what to do in a game to kind of turn it around or make a difference, even though he's got players at his disposal to do that. In this game, I think Chelsea played Malo Gusto in like a inverted role where he kept coming into midfield, and you could just see the confusion in the Arsenal ranks of just, who do they mark and, where do they closely follow? And it felt like the rhythm was disrupted by that one small change, and it took him a while to kind of respond to it. I think Odegaard is so important to this team, though. When he's come back in, you can see the difference he makes to just the flow. They're not as predictable. They're not going down the flanks to Martinelli and to Saka all the time. Like, he can do something magical. And his assist, Odegaard, was key, I think, to them still being competitive in this game. But yeah, I think Arteta himself looks rattled on the touchline. I don't know if you saw that, but he looks like he's always shouting at the players, at the fourth official. That's not very reassuring either, is it? You want a bit of calm in the team and on the touchline, don't you?
I just think he has a lot of emotion. He's that kind of guy, isn't he? He's like that, though. I think it's similar to Pep. Like, you look at him when he's on the touchline, Jurgen Klopp. You have these managers who are so kind of charismatic, and they are very open with like their body language and their emotions. They leave it all out there, and you can see it. You can see it very well, whereas some managers are a bit more withdrawn. But yeah, it is at times. I can imagine it's probably a little bit draining. Like,
it's not just him. It's his whole bench. His whole bench are always up on their feet screaming some instructions. It's got to be a bit disorientating.
Yeah, and I agree. I think particularly with this set of players at the moment, I do think there is sometimes a little bit of almost like a lack of a plan B, I think, if it's not going their way. We mentioned about lack of sort of game changers in there. I thought Martinelli had a decent performance, to be fair. I think at times, he really did threaten that left-hand side. And obviously took a goal well, although I'm going to be honest, I think Sanchez should be doing better there. His near post.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It wasn't the most powerful of finishes either. It wasn't right, like it was right against the post. I think probably should be doing a bit better. But I think it's encouraging to see Martinelli actually making a difference, because I've been one of his critiques in the last few weeks and said that he needs to do more, because
Yeah.
They can't be constantly relying on Saka, and obviously after he's come off again, that's got to be a worry thing for Arsenal now.
Yeah, of course.
But the international break can't have come up at much more of a brilliant time for them, I think, in looking to get bodies back in there.
Well, they've got Forest next at home, which is not going to be an easy game for them once the Premier League resumes. They've still got to play Sporting in the Champions League, and then they're at West Ham, and then it's the Man United game in December. So there's a tough run of games, I think, coming for Arsenal. They've just got to not drop any points, really, because I think that's the key to them having any kind of title charge is they've got enough points dropped already. So they need to come big in the games where it matters. They need to come big in every game, and I think that's going to be really difficult for them. I don't think there's any team that's recovered a 9-point deficit and won the league after 11 games. So if they do it, it should be history making. Stranger things have happened, so we'll see. But yeah, it doesn't look great for Arsenal, does it? But on the other side of the title challenge, Liverpool, Dave, we'll talk about them briefly because I don't think either of us saw much of the game, did we? But they beat Villa and moved to the top after that win, and that's 5 points clear now against City after results went their way. They, on the other hand, are looking pretty irresistible at the minute on every front, like top of the Champions League. After a really difficult run of games recently and a few more to come, they still keep swatting aside opponents and sometimes quite luckily as well. Is it a case of luck being on their side as well, do you think, more than most other teams, or do you think something's happening there?
I don't think it's such a case as luck, but I do think they're the way they're managing in their squad at the moment. I think they're really kind of utilising it where they can. Obviously, Jota's still out, so they haven't got him there. But, Darwin Núñez, I think they obviously earmarked him for this game and were looking at that high line of Villa and probably looking to kind of get him behind there and use him where they could. And, he had a couple of good opportunities, probably should have scored.
Yeah.
But I do think they are managing that squad really well. And when you look at some of the players who have come to the fore this season, we mentioned Curtis Jones last season, he had another good game this week. I think some of his role in particular in that midfield, it's not the prettiest, I think, but off of the ball he's definitely improved massively. I think his defensive side of his game, he's mopping up there a little bit and he's keeping it simple when he has to, moving the game on.
True.
But I think their management, Arne Slot's game management has been really impressive. Yeah. And any sort of changes in momentum in the case in games, he has actually made really positive sort of substitutions and decisions, I think, at times when it has actually decided it for them. I think in this game, the Villa probably didn't really help themselves, if we're being honest. They've been poor for 3 or 4 weeks now, and I think Miles will be tearing his hair out if he's not already. With what's going on in his life. And I think it was a difficult game to watch, to be honest. But this Liverpool team, they just keep churning out results, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And even when on a game where Darwin Núñez missed so many chances, he still scored in the end out of one of them. And Mo Salah as well. I think as long as you've got Mo Salah in your team in this kind of form, like, you've always got a chance. I think this is the contrast I was talking about between Arsenal and now Liverpool, is that Arne Slot's just so calm. Like, his team and his play, the build-up play from Liverpool, it's like they know what they can do. It's no panic. Like, if they went behind, I don't think they'd panic. And even though they struggled to hit the goal and hit the target, and Núñez didn't score for a while, like, he persisted and he came good. And it feels like they're always going to kind of find a breakthrough eventually. Compare that to Arteta, who seems to get stressed out quite early on in games. I feel like Slot's that calming influence that teams need to see. So that, for me, has been a big difference for Liverpool. And I hate to admit it because I bloody hate Liverpool, but they're a very likeable team. Like, the way they play, it's easy on the eye. It's grown, I think, in terms of the way Klopp used to play compared to now, in that it is just so calm. Whereas with Klopp, it was always like full throttle. And that's quite pleasing, I think. So if City are going to lose the league this season, I think it would be to a team in Liverpool who look like worthy winners so far. It's easy to get carried away, but the kind of football they're playing, it's probably amongst the best in Europe. And that bodes well, I think, for the Champions League as well.
Yeah, I think they're a team definitely that have been able to kind of stem the flow of, if a game's not been going their way. They've had moments where they've been able to turn it around. I mean, you look at the Arsenal game where, for the most part, probably up until sort of like the last 25 minutes, Arsenal were much the better side and, were full value for their lead. But they've just got something about them, haven't they, this Liverpool team? They're clinical in moments. And I think you look at, like, when you've got Mo Salah in there, who's, I think as a player, he's probably not got that burst of pace now that he probably had, years ago. but he's got that experience and that intelligence, I think.
So intelligent.
To create these opportunities where he does in games. I just think that they're really he's really probably having one of his best seasons that he's had in a long time.
Yeah. Well, difficult for the Liverpool fans to see a legend leave the club in Jurgen Klopp, but so far his replacement is doing loads to kind of allay those fears, isn't he? And probably get more excitement growing. On that note, let's talk about Manchester United, shall we? As one legend exits the club in Ruud van Nistelrooy. Obviously, it's the Ruben Amorim era after the international break, so we can see what he's all about. I think he'll obviously spend some time with probably some of the injured players that are still at Carrington during this break as well, and find his way around and get his bearings. But Van Nistelrooy, let's talk about him for a moment. Obviously, he's had an excellent record since he's been in interim charge. Against some pretty easy opposition, to be fair. Leicester City twice as well, which gifted the games to him on a plate. But he's got that confidence back in the team. And Bruno Fernandes, the difference in him has been stark, hasn't it? 5 goals in 4 games under him, whereas he got none before under Ten Hag. So something's changed there. Whether that's the coach that's made the difference or not, who knows? But it's good to see United winning a game comfortably, first of all, 3-0 against Leicester. And he also hands over the club in much better condition after 4 games in charge, which is, again, crazy, isn't it? The impact he's had. And it'll be sad to see him leave.
Yeah, I don't know if you can call it bittersweet, but I think it's great to see him have this moment, I think, as a boss. And I think you saw him take it in.
Yeah, definitely.
At the end of the Leicester game, just to have a moment like that, and even if it's for once in your life that you're in charge of your club for 4 games, and you get to experience that kind of reception from an Old Trafford crowd, I think it's worth it, and it'll feel that. I think he'll be overwhelmed. I think from that, you could see he was touched by the sort of the reception that he did have. But I think get the opportunity he did, just have that experience as a manager in charge of a club, this for even such a short time. I think will have meant a lot to him. It's sad to see him go. I don't think it's entirely surprising because I think it's a little bit of an awkward situation for me. If you keep him in there, it's almost okay. What are you comfortable with? His role was as an assistant before. Are you gonna drop him down and demote him to a coach of some sort? It almost kind of interferes, I think, to what probably Ruben Amorim, he's got his tried and tested formula there. He's got his set of coaching staff. He knows, what each role he's going to have for each of that staff. And I just think it is a little bit of an interference for me if he does keep in there.
Yeah,
having said that, I love that. I love Ruud. He's a legend of the club, and he always will be. I think it's exciting. I think now because there's a next step in place, and we've got to wait a couple of weeks to see what his setup's going to be and what his first team setups. I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of side he goes for. Yeah,
it's really exciting because he's got time to kind of prepare that as well before the first game comes around. And on Van Nistelrooy as well, I think opinion amongst fans has been kind of divided about this decision, and I don't know whose decision it was, whether it was like a mutual thing that they came to, or whether Amorim has just gone, nah, sorry, there's no room for you in this backroom staff. Either way, I think the right time to go is now for Van Nistelrooy, because, I kind of regret Solskjaer staying on to an extent. He should have stayed as interim, gone out on a high and then handed over to somebody with the right experience. So I don't want to tarnish his reputation or legacy. I also want to leave the door open for Van Nistelrooy to come back at some point. I think he'll go away and become a good manager again.
I think there are some encouraging signs, in his short reign. I think if you look at what he did with Casemiro and Ugarte, I think that partnership really complemented Bruno really well. Definitely. And I think that was definitely helped Bruno kind of on the expansive side of his game. I think he was able to be a little bit more free in his role and was probably a bit able to stay in the areas where he could actually hurt teams. And I think that's what he struggled with this season. He's been kind of all over the pitch as opposed to in the areas where he's at his best, and creating opportunities and scoring goals himself is something we've missed, I think, over the last year.
Yeah,
8 to 18 months. I don't think we've seen enough of it, and we know what he's capable of. But I think that partnership of Casemiro and Ugarte, it's a good partnership, and I think that might be the way to go at present. Whether Amorim sees that as the case or not is another. But if you look in the last game as well, I think Van Nistelrooy made 2 changes quite early on in the second half. He took Rashford off and he took Diogo Dalot off, who were probably our two worst players at the time. I think you've got to have that kind of ruthlessness as a manager and see
Agreed. Yeah.
at times in games when things aren't going your way and make those decisions quickly. Unlike, I think, when Ten Hag is, I think it kind of dragged on a little bit and you were just thinking, make a change. Like
every game.
We're just cruising, if we're waiting for something to happen or waiting to go behind. So it's encouraging. And like you say, who knows? He could be back at some point.
Yeah. I think so. I think it leaves the door open, and I think it leaves Van Nistelrooy leaving on a high. Like, his record in charge was good, and I think that's something that he can be proud of. And he's one of those players, I think, former players who, whenever he comes back to the club in whatever capacity, he'll always be kind of revered now, which is great.
I think it's difficult, isn't it? I think it's especially with what Solskjaer went through in the past. You almost don't want it to be back because you don't want it to go horribly wrong. And I
Until it's ready.
I think some of the treatment that Solskjaer, it wasn't great to see. And I think probably even things that we've probably thought in the past or just said, like, look, he needs to go. Like, we all feel a little bit bad about how it ended for him.
Yeah, true.
And I don't think anybody wants to be in that situation again, really.
No. To finish the pod then, Dave, just a couple of games to talk about as the best of the rest. Brentford 3, Bournemouth 2 was a really entertaining game between two teams that I think, like we were talking about, have raised their game considerably this season, and it was really a good game to watch. Notable mention for them, we didn't have time to talk about that game. Also, Forest 1, Newcastle 3. It felt like a return to form for Newcastle in some ways, with Alexander Isak coming back into the team and doing well. And I think Bruno Guimaraes as well, having his best game for a long time in a Newcastle shirt. Almost like vindication of Eddie Howe staying on as manager and not going to England in some ways. I feel like that's given the team a lift too. Any other games stand out for you, or anything else you wanted to talk about, mate, from the Premier League this weekend? Notable mentions?
Well, just as much as Crystal Palace's real struggle at the minute, just how consistent Fulham are. I think they've got a great team there at the moment. I think the likes of, obviously, Emile Smith-Rowe, who's been brought in there and doing a great job. The Croydon De Bruyne, I think they call him.
He's playing brilliantly.
Yeah, I think he's added a lot to that team, and I think Raul Jimenez is his return to the team after Muniz had such a great team great season last year. I think it's been a lot of fans have probably thought, why has he gone out of the team? But you look at Jimenez and how he's performed of late.
Yeah,
he's done great as well. But yeah, I think Palace
is a concern.
You really do worry, I think, for Glasner at the moment, don't you? And after we spoke so highly of him last year and towards the end of last year when they had such a great end to the season, it's just they're really struggling. And I just think there's a few pieces missing to the puzzle. Obviously, Elise's exit hasn't helped them. I think in their creative side, they're lacking a little bit. And Mateta's just obviously not scoring as many goals as he was. Everything was going in. Everything was, that he touched turned to gold last season. I don't think he's having a bad season. He's obviously scored a few, but I just think they do lack a little bit there. And I think they've got enough to stay up. It's just, I think it's more for the manager I worry about, to be honest.
Yeah, agreed. That's all we've got time for this week's pod. That's all the Premier League action wrapped up for a couple of weeks now, isn't it? With the international break, and it'll be England we discuss next week. We all love talking about England, don't we, Dave? Hopefully we'll have Miles back on the pod to talk about that then. Until next week, Dave, have a good one, mate. I'll speak to you soon.
You too. See you again.
See you later.